Last time we were talking about stuff, we were talking about the Crusades, and we were talking about the First Crusade. We had four main characters that we're talking about for the First Crusade. The first one of our character is Godfrey of Bouillon. He was the Duke of Loire-Lorraine in the Holy Roman Empire. The second person we talked about was Bohemond Taranto. He was the Baron of Taranto in the Duchy of Apulia. Third one we talked about was Raymond of Toulouse. He was the Count of Toulouse in the Kingdom of France. And the fourth one we talked about was Robert of Flanders, who's a Count of Flanders, also in the Kingdom of France. All right. So today what we're going to talk about is we had talked about last time how the first crusading forces, they had gone all the way over from Europe over in here, and they had made their way over to Constantinople. All right, so you had Flanders right here, Toulouse here, Lower Lorraine here, and Duchy of Apulia down here, and they had all made their way over to Constantinople, where Alexios I Comnenus, where he was at with his forces in the Byzantine Empire, waiting for the arrival of the proper crusading forces. Once these four guys all met up at Constantinople, one by one they each pledged that they would return any city that they took over in Turkey, that they would give that back to Alexios Comnenus. So Godfrey made the pledge, Beaumont made the pledge, and Robert made the pledge that they would each do so. However, Raymond of Toulouse, he wouldn't take the pledge that he would return any city that he took over in Turkey back to Alexios Comnenus. Instead, he just simply said he could only make a pledge to God, and that Alexios Comnenus wasn't, God. So they just kind of came to an understanding that he probably would. That seemed to be kind of from the discussion of what happened. All right. So once all four of these guys had met up at Constantinople with Alexios Comnenus, the First Crusade traveled over to the city of Nicaea, right here. Now, the city of Nicaea is the place where the Peasants' Crusade was defeated at. So, First Crusade shows up by the city of Nicaea along with the Byzantines, and they start to siege the city of Nicaea. Go ahead and make a bullet and write down Siege of Nicaea 1097. So, go ahead and make a bullet and write down Siege of Nicaea 1097, or June, sorry, of 1097. So, Siege of Nicaea, June 1097. So, what is a siege? After you make the bullet, we're going to make a 1, and we're going to write down siege. When you completely surround a city and keep all food and water from getting in. So, go ahead and make a 1 and write down siege, equal sign, when you completely surround a city and keep all food and water from getting in. So, when you're doing a siege, that's when you're keeping all food and water from getting inside of a city to get that city to surrender to you and to give up the city. All right, so that's the entire goal of a siege, is just to get the people inside of it to give up, so that way you can take over the city. Usually, however, if you did surrender a city, the takeover of the city wasn't always pleasant. Sometimes, the army that was sieging you would simply take over and have anyone who was defending the city give up their weapons and such. Other times, once again, inside the city, they murdered the people inside the city and then stole their stuff. It kind of depends on what would happen, but those are kind of generally what could happen. So, it could either be pretty peaceful or it could be a very violent surrender. During the siege of Nicaea, what ends up happening is that the Crusaders have surrounded the city of Nicaea, as you can see here in the picture. They have surrounded the city of Nicaea, and they're cutting it off from food and water by land. However, the city of Nicaea is on a lake, so they couldn't cut off the lake access. The Byzantine Empire, they had some boats that they deconstructed on the Mediterranean Sea and then brought that deconstructed parts over land to the lake of Nicaea and then reconstructed those boats on the lake of Nicaea. And then they started sieging the city of Nicaea on the lake. So the Crusaders were surrounding the city on land. The Byzantine Empire was on the lake, cutting off the city from food that way. Eventually, what ends up happening, the Lord of Nicaea, the guy who was in charge, he ends up surrendering the city, but not to the Crusaders. What ends up happening is that the Byzantine Emperor, Alexius Comnenus, he brings a boat up to the city gates, the sea gates of Nicaea, and he tells the Lord of Nicaea, he's like, hey, you don't want to let these Crusaders in. Just like the Peasants Crusade, those guys are just going to come inside your city. They're going to stab people, steal your stuff. Just give the city to me. I won't stab anybody and steal your stuff. So, city Senate surrenders to Alexis Comnenus. He brings his troops inside, puts his flag up on the city walls. And the Crusaders are a bit annoyed by this because, they're besieging the city. It's part of their right to go inside the city and stab some people and take their stuff. So they're pretty ticked off about this. They decide, you know what, we're just going to kind of leave Alexis Comnenus and we're going to head down to Jerusalem on our own without him. And Alexis Comnenus is like, hey guys, don't worry. I'll join you later. So Crusade goes on their own without Alexis Comnenus. So they go on their own. And so they start heading down this way. So they start heading down this way, heading towards Jerusalem. So they're making their way this way towards Jerusalem. There was a guy who controlled the city of Nicaea, like another major lord above the guy that was currently in control of Nicaea. He did move troops over to Nicaea to break the siege. However, once he got there, he saw that the Crusaders had a huge military force and then was like, nope, and then turned around and went back. All right. Okay, so the Crusader forces, they're moving down southward. They're heading this way. And while they're moving down southward, we're going to talk a little about the tactics of both the Seljuk Turks and the Crusaders. Go to make a bullet and write down Seljuk Turk Tactics. So make a bullet and write down Seljuk Turk Tactics. The Seljuk Turks don't fight in the same way as Crusaders, and the Crusaders found this very frustrating. At the same time, the Crusaders didn't fight in the same way as the Seljuk Turks, and the Seljuk Turks found the way that the Crusaders fought also frustrating. So they both fought in a different way than their opponent, and both were kind of frustrated by the way that the other one fought, since it wasn't the standard way that combat was conducted at this time period. After you have bullet Seljuk Turk tactics, we're going to make a 1, and we're going to write down light armor and light weapons. So the Seljuk Turks had light armor and light weapons, and they would engage the enemy, pull back, engage the enemy, and pull back with light armor and light weapons. So that lightness allowed them to kind of move very quickly and engage and move back. After you have 1, make a 2, and write down hit and run. So 2 hit and run. So they didn't wear very heavy armor. They want to have like a full plate armor. Like when you look at the Crusaders, they're going to have full plate armor. So they're going to have full armor from head to toe if they're a knight. While you're kind of more higher level warriors in a Seljuk Turk force, they would have kind of more of a medium armor from head to toe. They want to have this like full armor from head to toe. So they have lighter weapons and lighter armor. And their goal was mainly to engage the enemy, generally with kind of horseback archers, as you see here, to engage and pull back, engage, pull back. That was kind of their idea because they wanted to wear down the enemy over time. So make a 3, wear down enemy over time. So their goal was to wear down an enemy over time, not just in one day fight a battle. You're talking they would fight a battle over a course of several days, could be weeks, of just wearing down their opponent. And that's how they were trying to defeat them. So they're trying to defeat their opponents by just kind of wearing them down over time. That was their entire goal. So just kind of trying to wear down their opponent over time. All right. So that's for the Seljuk Turk tactics. What about the Crusader tactics? Well, Crusader tactics are different than those tactics of the Seljuk Turks. Go ahead and write down a bullet and write down Crusader tactics. So bullet Crusader tactics. So Crusader tactics work the same as the Seljuk Turks. First off, the Crusaders, they used heavy armor and heavy weapons. Go ahead and make a 1 and write down heavy armor and heavy weapons. Like you can kind of see down in the picture down below in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see how the Crusaders down there, you'll see how they have full armor from head to toe. And these are the Teutonic Knight order. I guess they have full armor from head to toe. And you can also see as well that they have a lance. You see this lance right there. Once again, this kind of a long spear. So the armor they're wearing, they have heavy armor on, head to toe. They have a shield. They have a lance. They also have a sword with them. So they do have a lot of equipment that they have, and that's what they like to use. Make it 2. Write down heavy cavalry charge. The way how Crusaders like to fight was they want to get their enemy. They want to maneuver them onto flat terrain where they can then hit the enemy with a heavy cavalry charge. Horses, just like everything, it's hard going up the hill. And for horses as well, it's hard to go up a hill. So they don't want to be anything that's hilly. Going downhill is fine, though, but not going uphill. Any terrain that's kind of rocky, don't want to be any rocky terrain. They want to be on, flat terrain, nothing hilly, not mountainous, right? They want to be a nice flat terrain where they kind of lease a heavy cavalry charge. That's what they kind of prefer. and that's how they want to finish off their battle. So they want to fight the enemy, engage them, maneuvering them to a good position on flat land, and then smash them with a heavy cavalry charge to finish them off. Make a 3, write down Decisive Battles. So 3 Decisive Battles. They like to engage people in decisive battles, and what I mean by that is they like to finish off their battles in one day. Unlike the Seljuk Turks that will engage over a course of several days, Crusaders want to fight the battle in one day, finish off the battle, and then move on. They don't want to be constantly engaging the same enemy over a course of several days. They want to completely annihilate that enemy and then move on. All right, next thing, we're going to make a 4. And we're going to write down how many people are in the First Crusade, which is 35,000 people. So go ahead and write down 35,000 people for number 4. So number 4, 35,000 people. There are 35,000 people in the crusading force. And the reason why I say people for is because we, just like we talked about before with our crusade leaders when we were talking about them yesterday, you had kind of 3 different groups, really. You had your knights, which are your guys that have money and they have their own armor, horse, and so forth. They actually have a lot of equipment, so they're rich people. All right, so your knights are your rich people. They got the best armor, best swords, and so forth. So they're the rich people. All right, and of those knights that are in the First Crusade, that's about 5,000. So there's 35,000 people in the First Crusade, but only about 5,000 knights, professional soldiers that train year-round in combat and have money and can buy all their own stuff, right? So you have about 5,000 knights, 5,000 professional soldiers, right? There's about another 20,000 infantrymen. Those are people that kind of have some training. They would generally be a garrison force for a city. They might have been people that just got called up and got some training, but they have some training and they've been provided weapons by their lord. Okay, so we talk about how the Raymond Count Toulouse, okay, he would buy weapons for his infantrymen. All right, these knights, on the other hand, he wanted to buy equipment for. He would just buy equipment for the infantrymen. And then there was another 10,000 people that would have been peasants. They didn't really have any training, they just came along. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and stop there for today.